I'm Mason Mount. You're listening to the London is Blue podcast.
All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. That's right, Dan here. Brandon is currently away somewhere, but you know what? Nick is like our N'Golo Kante, at least N'Golo Kante from seasons prior, and doesn't miss a match, doesn't miss a pod. Welcome back, Nicholas.
Hello, team. We're all here. It's fine. Everything's good.
Everything is good. And to round out the three, because we like to enter into this conversation with just another individual, we did bring the wonderful Dan Levine back to join us. Dan, it has been far too long since Boston and Rooftop Beers, but we are super excited to get you back on.
It has been too long, but it's great to be back.
And we are looking very, very much forward to being over in London in the quite near future, Nick. And I think we will probably enjoy some more beers with Dan Levine in short order.
Yeah, I'm hoping there's still beer left when we're there, Dan. That's what I'm worried about with the whole drinking situation, and I think fans are just at their wits' end 5 matches into the year. It's pretty crazy.
There will always be beer in London. Fear not. So that's one thing we can assure you of.
Well, we are glad to hear that. Nick, the overall theme for today's show, since you put it in here, I just want to let you run with that.
A bit of naivete, I think, and we'll get into the reasons why. But if you watch the match, I'm sure that you will have also seen a little bit of naivete, and that's okay.
All right, well, that is the theme, the in Ron Burgundy style naivete, and we will go through a couple of topics today. Lampard's management of the wafer-thin squad we have at the moment, thanks to injuries, and where we'd like to see Lampard improve, because, yes, we can be critical in context as well. If the curse of the number 9 shirt is being dispelled in front of our eyes by Tammy Abraham back on another brace, Tomori's confident start in the Premier League in lieu of Andreas Christensen, and then how Chelsea and us as supporters can help curb the abuse of players online. And before we jump into some of the housekeeping, Nick, I see that you embedded a wonderful tweet from Dan Levine here, pre-match that occurred yesterday.
Right, and I need Dan to read it because I only think it comes across correctly with his voice. So Dan, will you please narrate your own tweet?
Well, just some background on this. I was just having a pint before the game, and what I wrote was: new pub security, entry with home ticket only. One guy made it to the bar unchecked, pursued by bouncer. Your ticket, please. Mate's got it. Home fans only. I'm afraid you'll have to leave. At which he lifted his sleeve to reveal a full Chelsea badge tattoo. That'll do.
Illegitimately, I know Dan puts out a lot of great content. I read this yesterday after all the negativity because I didn't see it in real time, and I think that is perhaps one of the most British stories I've ever heard, and I think it's wonderful. And I appreciate your anecdotal content as always, Dan. More, please.
Yep, I shall. In service of your needs, I shall make sure I return to the pub and have another pint. So I now know I have your authorization to do that.
Do it for me, please.
Okay.
It's always good when Nick gives away the hall pass. He gave you the thumbs up that is required. All right, last couple bits of housekeeping before we get into the episode today. We did get some more iTunes reviews or Apple Podcast reviews. Thank you so much to everybody who leaves those. Helps us get connected with new listeners. We had Rich, multiple nines repeating from the U.S. We had Brian O. We had Havrid. We had Sup128. And then Thing, who also said to give a shout out to his friend Griff. So we want to thank everybody there for leaving some wonderful 5-star reviews in Apple Podcasts. Do it for the next episode, and we will hook you up with a shout out. Also, since Brandon's not here, he typically does these. I'll do these as well. Patreon, we had a huge rush of people who've joined us in the past couple weeks. We want to thank Connie, Ivan, Byron, Jamie, Mikal, and Andrew for jumping into Patreon, joining us on Discord. We really enjoyed the conversation. Had an opportunity to be much more positive and even keeled in the Discord chat, Nick, on the match and kind of the reflection on it versus what people saw in other spheres online.
It is. The audience curated on Discord is very thoughtful, and I think if you're looking for more of that type of conversation and less of morons, Lampard out, Zuma out, blah blah blah, then perhaps the Discord channel is a better spot for you. I will also mention, because Dan is at work feverishly sending stickers from our last week of Patreon support. If you are in Patreon, you got in before the deadline on the stickers, please update your address within your profile so that we can actually send you something, because otherwise Dan's just sending them to anywhere, and that means you're not going to get them. So do that for us and we'll be good. I shall move on to the promo codes quickly, because we've got a couple of big sales from our partners that I want to get to. World Soccer Shop, code LondonPod for 10% off. That's a staple. Talisman caps, our code is LondonBlue10 for 10% off $35 or more, but they're also doing a kickoff sale. So they're doing 15% off hoodies, tees, polos, and then you can take an additional 15% off all sale apparel. So use the code FALL15, use the code LondonBlue10. Go get yourself some quality stuff from Talisman. And then finally, the big one, classic football shirts, code CFS1313 for 20% off their entire store. And you guys know that we went to their London store to do our last show with the Fancast in January, and it was absolutely outstanding. We know that multiple people, probably a third of our people, bought shirts while we're in there. We may even go, Dan, buy some shirts as we head to a little bit of Oktoberfest in a month or so.
Well, here's a real question. Dan Levine, would it be safe to wear a Drogba jersey in Oktoberfest in Munich? Is that okay now? Has the pain gone away?
Absolutely. I would be disappointed if you didn't. And just a serious note, when I was out there for the final in 2012, the Munich fans were fantastic. They were absolutely magnificent after the game, and full of positive congratulations. We received a very, very warm welcome. So I wouldn't worry about that at all.
All right. Well, then it is done. We will look forward to Nick's Instagram in short order. But that's it. Housekeeping done, out of the way. We got to talk about the match. Yes, it was against Sheffield United in the Premier League at Stamford Bridge. Saturday, August 31st, 2019. Score: Chelsea 2, Sheffield United also 2. Nick, lineup though had a little change, a little bit of a twist from what we had seen in the prior match.
Yes, that little twist came into the form of Fikayo Tomori getting a start over Andreas Christensen. So we had obviously Arista Balaga at the back, Aspilicueta, Tomori, Zuma, Emerson. Ross Barkley gets his second start in a row with Jorginho and Mateo Kovacic. And then Christian Pulisic, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount. I don't, Dan, as you were watching this, I didn't quite see. It looked like there was a 4-3-3 in the first half and then a 4-2-3-1 in the second half. Can you confirm or deny the formation?
Yeah, pretty much. I think, like yourself, I was quite surprised looking at that lineup from the start, the defensive lineup in particular. I thought it was great that Fikayo Tomori was getting a big opportunity there. I thought, if you're going to do it, this was a good game to do it. I was perhaps a little surprised at the man that he was chosen to be beside. I thought maybe if you're going to drop one of the two, then it might be Zuma rather than Christensen who was dropped. But, it looked like a team that had enough there to win the game.
Well, we did see Opta Joe tweeting 24, the average age of Chelsea's starting 11 against Sheffield United, even though Frank Lampard at his post-match press conference said that wasn't really as relevant as it could be, as 24 years of age and 158 days, their youngest ever in a Premier League match. Whippersnappers. We also saw substitutes from William Mishi and Billy Gilmore. We had unused subs of Olivier Giroud, Willy Caballero, Andreas Christensen, and Marcus Alonso. Team stats were 13 shots to Chelsea to Sheffield United's 8, 5 shots on target to their 2, 63% possession to their 37%. We saw pass accuracy of 87% to their 78%. Terms of offsides, 2 to their 0, corners 3 to their 4, and expected goals, Nick, would be 1.9 to us, 2 and 1 to Sheffield United, plus an own goal.
plus an own goal, of which we will talk about here relatively shortly. Again, we kind of, Dan, as we were watching the match, and I'm sure you kind of saw the same thing. The team started, fast. I think they controlled almost every second of the first half, and then they let Sheffield back in at the beginning of the second half, and it essentially went the opposite way from there. So any overall thoughts about what you saw yesterday?
Yeah, it was in a lot of ways it was quite similar to the Leicester game, which finished with the same scoreline. And Chelsea have looked very good from the start. They come out the blocks pretty fast, but they do seem to wear themselves out pretty quick. And I think one of the developing concerns in this side is how tired a lot of the players are starting to look in the second half, and of course, how quickly Sheffield United took advantage of that after the half time. I don't know whether there is more that can be done with conditioning, whether there's more that can be done about what Chelsea are doing in the resting phase. They're just all learning points there. It is a learning experience at the moment. We have a young team, we have a young manager, and it will take time.
That is far too reasoned an approach, Dan. But let's get in and kind of talk about that. Is obviously a lot of the criticism at full time was that Chelsea were really cruising to a 3-point victory in the first half. I think he even tweeted out the fact that the table at one point was City, Liverpool, and Chelsea 1, 2, 3 based upon where we were in the match and where the other teams were in terms of goal difference and how quickly that changed. But we only acquiesced then to Sheffield and allowed them to take an equal share of points at the Bridge. So how, why, what went wrong for Lampard and the Blues? I know you had a couple of comments that you were able to kind of get out of, you and the rest of the journalist team were able to get out of Frank. But he talked about it's not defense, it's conceding as a team, the lack of concentration. We switch off in a game which we should be comfortably seeing out at 2-0. I felt he was a pretty fair critic of himself and what happened in the match.
Yeah, I think he was, and he admitted that it was a game that they should have won, and I think you have to take that position. The disappointment was very, very strong. It was very, very clear. Frank, is a man I've been talking to for a long, long time at football, and he does wear that disappointment very, very close to the surface. And it was clear post-match at Stamford Bridge. But as he says, it's a team game. A lot of people. Things like Twitter being the way they are, people like to be reactionary. They like to find an individual to blame. But if you're conceding silly goals, then it is generally down to a team failing rather than an individual one, and that is what happened, I think.
Yeah, Nick, I know that there was also the comment, too, that we're in a moment now where we obviously need to stop conceding so many goals in such a matter-of-fact way that probably spoke to your heart. But where do you feel, or maybe where did you see some of the larger team failings that occurred in this match?
We talked about it after the Leicester match, the mental fatigue being just as crucial as the physical fatigue. And I think when you have a really young team, average 24 and however many months again, that's a huge risk. I mean, Frank knows that the energy and the enthusiasm and the crowd getting behind these young guys is an obvious bonus, but he also has to know that they're just not as seasoned as some of the other players in the squad. Olivier Giroud, World Cup winner. Some of these options off of the bench that were there yesterday. Even a Marcos Alonso has been through the wars. In a way that maybe some of our other younger players haven't. So it's not to say that I would have played Marcos Alonso over Billy Gilmore. Obviously, they play two different positions, so don't tweet at me. But I think the point that I'm kind of making, I think the one that was very obvious to me yesterday was when we conceded the first goal, Dan Levine, right after halftime. The mentality of the team did not look very strong. They didn't look very confident, and that kind of permeated through the rest of the half. And I think that, to me, sure, is physical, right? They just went through an exhausting preseason and have had a ripping hot start to the Premier League season. But it's also, I think it's more almost mental fatigue at this point.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. The Sheffield United manager said very clearly after the game that the timing of their first goal was absolutely crucial, and it really did set the tone for the second half. You could see that Chelsea were not always physically, but certainly mentally on the back foot, if you like. They felt that that Sheffield United suddenly had the sign over them, if you like, and that carried on in the same way. It is a difficulty, isn't it, with a young side, that sort of mental robustness. And we'll talk about it shortly, I'm sure. But the late substitution of Billy Gilmore for Kovacic worried a lot of people, myself included, because that was taking out that added experience, that added knowledge of the world. But these are lessons that will be learned.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to talk about the substitutions, and I know I was surprised to see Billy Gilmore come on. I was excited in the moment, in just that half a second before processing that it was for Kovacic coming off, and I know that Frank after the match did speak to the fact that it was a like-for-like substitution, that Kovacic was fatigued, and I definitely felt like, at least in the telecast stand, that it looked like he was absolutely just beat, kind of filling in and really having been the deputy for N'Golo Kante, which if that's the benchmark that people have for the job, anyone who's going to have to do a similar shift is going to feel that way at the end of a match. But I don't know if it was more of should it have been someone like Andreas Christensen, who's been, has played a defensive midfielder position before for his national team, would have been a better fit there. I just felt like I agree that Kovacic looked tired, but I don't necessarily feel like Billy Gilmore was the right fix off the bench for him.
He did look tired, yes, and I think maybe on some readings he maybe was hobbling slightly as well, which meant that it was maybe the right time to take him off. Frank was quite defensive on that point. He said that was exactly the reason, and he said it was like for like. He also later in his press conference mentioned that Christensen can play in midfield, so that's a little nod to what you were saying there as well. On Gilmore, I was absolutely delighted to see him come on and make his debut. It's a fantastic thing for a young man of his age and his ability to do. But at the same time, I was filled with certain trepidation that it was being done at 2-1. I joked to the person I was sat next to at the time that Mourinho, for example, wouldn't have done that unless we were 7-0 up. And we'd never be 7-0 up under Mourinho. It just wouldn't happen. It's difficult, isn't it? Because it's weighing up whether in theory, slightly weaker opposition of Sheffield United is a good time to give him the opportunity against dragging the game over the line. That is a question I have no doubt Frank will turn over in his mind many, many times in the coming couple of weeks of the international break.
I think that Nick, it's probably worth remembering or reminding people that Frank Lampard is only in his second full season as a manager, and that these lessons are going to be harsh occasionally, and they're going to feel crappy to watch a lead kind of slip away. But it's okay to be critical, but it's also important to have maybe the context of what the situation is.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is fine to say that that was not Frank Lampard's best match as a manager, and again, we're not the hot take machine. If you're looking for that, you should probably go to, one of the 150 other Chelsea podcasts that exist out there. My take on Frank has always been that we have to, just as we're willing to give these young players a lot of benefit of doubt and a lot of time, we have to give him that. Now, I will say, as the captain of the ship, he has to be on his A game more often than even the players have to be on theirs. He has to get the tactics right. He has to set up the team right. He has to have the dressing room mentality in a really good place, and that kind of all stems from him. And he clearly, I think his biggest challenge right now is just leadership on this team. It's not fatigue from a physical side, because I think the team's going to get more fit as the season goes on. But I think it's developing leaders, whether they're young or old, doesn't matter to me. But that's where I think Dan Levine, the mental fatigue starts to kind of dissipate when you have more strong leaders who are being developed in the team, who know at 2-1 that we have to close up shop a little bit instead of being so open at the back. We have to make sure that our midfield can pass the ball to each other from the 80th minute on, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's his biggest challenge, and I'm hoping that he has a chance to start developing real leaders.
Absolutely. I think I'd liken this period in Chelsea history a little bit to after Andre Villas-Boas left and was replaced by Robbie Di Matteo. And people will maybe balk at that, but I'll clarify. When Andre was managing, it was a very intense period. There wasn't a lot of freedom. Everything was very, very structured. People had to follow every last piece of minutiae. And Robbie and Eddie Newton came in and they lifted the weight off people's shoulders. People enjoyed their football a lot more. And that's what I'm seeing at Chelsea now. I spoke to Mateo Kovacic at Norwich last week, and he spoke more than once about the freedom players have. And it's giving professionals that little bit of leeway, that understanding, that belief in themselves that they can do, they can make those decisions. And I think Frank is being very good at that. But at the same time, the discipline of the team as a whole that needs some work. So it is a matter of getting these things in the right order. He's sorting out the key things first. People are enjoying their football a bit more. What we need to do next, of course, is shut up the goals and enjoy the results.
I think that's a very good call out. Especially enjoyed the moment where Kovacic actually came close to scoring a goal, and the little interaction between Frank and Kovacic in that moment, Nick, was I think just embodies what Dan is saying, that there definitely is a good synergy and connection from the manager to the players in this team right now.
It was my favorite part of the entire match. I thought that was so good. I think you've been waiting for a Chelsea manager for a long time that has a really good rapport with the players, who isn't just yelling or screaming or sitting and sulking. I think Kovacic looked over, saw Frank do like that close, that little sign, knew exactly what he was talking about. I think it's probably Frank Lampard's mission in life right now to get Kovacic 5 Premier League goals this year. So I'm excited about that piece. I think where the team's seen a lot of turnover, Dan Levine, we have kind of a new center back pairing. We have, a captain kind of from last season who's struggling a little bit, a new left back, Jorginho, basically the focal point in midfield still, but missing a lot of pieces, and a brand new front three. There's just a lot to kind of get this team to gel very quickly. And unfortunately, you would have thought that Sheffield United at home would have been a cakewalk otherwise.
Yeah, it is all very shiny and new. And what Frank needs now is a home win. It would be lovely to get that. It's a shame that didn't happen this game. It probably should have done. But as they say, we go again. I'll just give you another example of that building team feeling that's there, that I thought was very, very powerful in the game against Sheffield United. There was a bit where Tammy Abraham, who I thought looked really, really good, battled his way down into the defence and was just closed down by 2 or 3 white shirts. And it was great work. And Olivier Giroud, who was warming up on the pitch side right alongside him, just applauded him. And I thought that was a really powerful thing. This is the guy who has been ousted from the team by the guy he's applauding. And that showed 2 things. It showed what a great professional Giroud is, and also what a great team spirit there is at Chelsea at the moment. And those sorts of things are the things that I think have been missing over the last season, or maybe 2.
Well, and you need that, right, Dan Dormer? You need, especially as a young team, when you're developing leaders and you're figuring out who everyone really is as players. Support is crucial. It's not maybe the Mourinho us against the world thing, but it has to be. It can't be splintered in the locker room for sure.
No, I think that's nail on the head, and I actually think the one substitution I was expecting, which I didn't see. I mean, again, it's very nice to give the charity minutes for Mishi a few donation level kind of contributions, but ultimately, in the dying moments of a game, when you want to just retain the possession, where you want to add a little bit of steel back into the side. I don't think of Mishi in the same way. I think of someone like Giroud, and he was probably the one person I would have expected to come on at the tail end there to make you happy, particularly Nick. And yeah, again, I think it's subs probably need some improvement. I think it's the starting 11 probably still isn't locked down permanently as we wait for Pedro to be back to fitness, which apparently will be hopefully for Wolves, when Conte to be back to fitness, when Rudiger is back in contention, when Reece James, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Robin Loftus-Cheek. Stop me if you've heard the names of some of these players, Nick. I mean, we have basically a full transfer signing grouping that's going to be coming in after this international break, or kind of throughout it, sprinkled in it, and that's going to change the complexity of this side once again.
Yeah, of course. I huge fan of many of the players that you just listed. So, I think it'll be great. And, I think the added benefit of that is, the competition, the squad increases, right? It's not just Tammy or Giroud or Mishi. It's Kovacic or N'Golo. It's, Mason and Pulisic and Callum and Pedro and Willian. And it's, I think it's the old iron sharpens iron thing, Dan Levine, where we got to get players who are healthy, and then we got to get these guys competing every day as if their job depended on it.
Absolutely, and the signs are good, because Tony Rudiger played 90 minutes for the development side on the night before the Sheffield United game, and looked okay by all accounts. So he should hopefully be back after the international break. N'Golo Kante is the other big one. And I think when those two in particular are in there, then that just gives the side so much more solidity. It will be fantastic. I think I touched on also on Twitter, if people are following during the game, the need for a bit more bulk in midfield. And that was given in the first half by Ross Barkley, who I think received a lot of criticism for apparently not doing enough. But it was notable when he was taken out, we looked a lot more flimsy without him. And having Ruben Loftus-Cheek in there with that increased physicality, that's what we're really lacking in the middle. You think of that midfield, and you put in Kante and Loftus-Cheek, and it's just so different. It's a completely different prospect as a side.
That is an exciting prospect. I do think one thing we should touch on before we transition is, there was a stat which Cesar Azpilicueta gave away possession 20 times against Sheffield United, at least 3 times more than any other player on the pitch. And Nick, I know that we've seen Azpilicueta contribute with some offensive, or not offensive performances, but offensive work that he's kind of contributed recently. How did you kind of look at that performance in the context of the larger side?
Well, if you looked at my Twitter mentions after his performance, then you would know, as an ardent supporter of Dave, that he did not have a good game, and I think he's kind of I think it's probably a mental fatigue thing with him too. We have to remember that Gary Cahill was supposed to be the captain of the club last year on the pitch, and then never saw a minute of game time, essentially. So, and while Dave has been a leader for quite some time, I think there's still, probably, heavy is the head that wears the crown kind of a scenario with him, where he is one of the more experienced players on a team that is full of youth and inexperience, and is trying to both lead and, kind of play his position in a higher pressing system that isn't maybe as comfortable as some of the low block Mourinho defenses, Dan Levine, and it's noticeable, that he played poorly yesterday. I think his side was at fault for both goals, and it's not been a really good start to the year. Although I think my caveat would be that he's still a ridiculously good professional, and I think we'll make it through this tough patch.
Yeah, Cesar's not had a great start to the season at all, unfortunately. If you think, people are very, very quick to have a go at him, but he's been a superb servant for Chelsea, I think. He's played practically every position along the back line. He was bought for not many pence, really, from when we got him. And he has been, at times, one of the mainstays of the side. But I think, arguably, he's maybe a bit too much football, and he is looking very, very physically and mentally tired. Um, this break is a good timing for him. It'd be nice if he can have a couple of weeks off and he can get his head straight. And hopefully he can restart the season against Wolves in a fortnight.
The one thing that I would point out is I think it's quick for people to take a look at just what they see as a part of the video broadcast, Dan. And I don't know if you see this when you're watching the match in person, when you could kind of get a little bit of a broader view of what's going on the pitch. But to me, it seems very frequently that what's happening with Cesar is that ultimately Emerson is so far up the pitch that what happens is that left center back in this match being Zuma, and the right center back and Tomori shift left to cover for Emerson going so far up. And basically Azpilicueta lives on an island, and if his partners in Tomori or in one of the midfielders, whether that be Jorginho or, typically, it's Jorginho on that side or Kovacic, don't get back to help him. He's kind of in a 2-on-1, 3-on-1 situation several times, which I think is the context people need to look for just versus maybe the individual mistake. And I don't know if you could comment on what you see in watching that live when you have a little bit of that broader view of the full pitch.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to what Frank is saying about team mistakes. People do need to cover for each other. And this is, an issue that's been there with any combination of defenders we've had over recent years. We always seem to have at least somebody at the back who is the whipping boy for on social media, if you like, for a lot of fans, and even in the stadium. People decide that every goal is a mistake of Azpilicueta, or they decide that every goal is the mistake of Alonso or David Luiz or whatever. And you defend as a unit. You do need to have that balance. And this is a lot about the way the side is maturing, it's gathering its pace, it's getting together, because you do need to have that balance when the game unexpectedly switches from the attacking phase to the defensive phase. And that is what makes a great side. These things don't come easily overnight, particularly with a bunch of players who are playing in a new way and don't know everyone who's around them. So this is where the hard yards are done on the training pitch.
Well, all right. Could I quickly say a last point on this? I got a really good question from Mark Vandahar on my timeline. Dan Levine, he wants to know, how does a young club get better when the captain plays poorly? He doesn't think it's a midseason slump because he's only played 5 games so far this season. But I would counter by saying that he's played almost every match for every season that he's been at Chelsea, plus Spain international duty, and seems to be one of the hardest trainers at the ground at Cobham. So, your thoughts?
A young club gets better by making mistakes and learning from them. So that is in essence is the answer to the question. But in terms of having one unit in the machine that is perceived to be underperforming, that's always going to be the case. In the case of Cesar Azpilicueta, I don't think I've met too many more committed and hardworking and focused professional footballers than Azpilicueta. He's certainly in the top 5% of hardworking players on and off the pitch that I think Chelsea have had in the last 10 years. And as I say, mistakes are team mistakes, and people just need to have each other's back, and they need to make sure that those mistakes don't happen again.
Well, that is some fine words to close out on that point. We will take a very, very quick break here, and then we will jump back into talking about Tammy, talking about Tomori, and talking about what the club and the supporters could do to better back the players across social. So, quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, well, we are back, and Nick, we missed the mark last week because apparently on the Chelsea and on the Chelsea Fancast and pretty much any other Chelsea publication, it was all about the Tammy double whammy for his brace last week. But we're going to rectify that and just call it the Tammy double whammy in this match because once again, the wonderful individual, the number 9, our number 9, gets 2 goals on the day, 4 goals in total for the season. Your thoughts?
Tammy, I think was a menace yesterday, whereas maybe his hold-up play wasn't as solid because Sheffield have some big center backs and midfielders. I think his whole purpose was to run off the shoulder, was to get in good positions, and I'll be honest, it was not a great collective offensive kind of movement of the ball day for Chelsea. I think Sheffield kind of made sure to sit back in a low block, but the 2 that Tammy got were gifts. I think when you're trying to be a menace and you make mistakes, or when you try and force mistakes, sometimes Dan Levine's mistakes will happen, and especially the second goal was a gift, and then the first one was a poor clearance from their goalkeeper, and again it's I think we all give Michy Batshuayi a lot of this credit. They all count. You just got to be in the right position to make them count.
Yeah, I think Tammy has just got that natural goal-scoring thing in his DNA, and it is absolutely fantastic to see him finding the net in the Premier League. People talk about gifts of goals, but you've got to be in the right place to take those gifts, and we've had enough strikers in recent years. Can you imagine if those opportunities had come up, where on the pitch at the time someone like Morata would have been? You can imagine
Offsides.
Well, exactly, or 10 yards to the left of the area. And Tammy gets into those positions, he moves around well, and he takes advantage of those chances. And it's absolutely wonderful to see a homegrown talent who scored 4 goals in 2 games in the Premier League for Chelsea.
Well, and I did bring this up, and I think it was important to kind of share this fact. So Tammy's 4 Premier League goals of 4 appearances, 254 minutes for Chelsea, is he's already matched 80% of the contribution that Giroud and Higuain have lifetime in Premier League for Chelsea. Both of them have 5 goals. Giroud 5 goals in 40 at over 1,400 minutes. Higuain had 5 goals in 14 matches at just close to 1,100 minutes. Michy has, in 33 games, 600 plus minutes, has 7 goals, so he's 57% of the way there to matching his contribution. Morata had 16 in 47 at over 3,000 minutes. That's 25% of the way there. And Costa was the last striker who knew how to find the back of the net with the most regularity, had 52 and 79 at over 7,500 minutes. So he's 8% of the way there, Nick. But I think the early days and early signs of Tammy is that he looks composed, he looks ready, and he is absolutely giving Frank no selection challenges at the number 9 position.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, right? Like just last week I kind of went back and forth with Nizar Kinsella on Tammy versus Giroud and the kind of benefits that each offer, and I think to Naz's credit, I'm not sure Giroud would have been there, even though I'm a big supporter of his, to take those 2 chances yesterday. And I think that is probably an instinctive type of move. So I think it's all credit to Tammy for showing out. I think if you had maybe Dan Levine a criticism of Tammy's performance, it's that it was really only one half. We need to see kind of a complete 90 minutes out of him, but I think he'll continue to learn and grow as well, and get his kind of fitness and stamina up.
Yeah, it is a difficulty at the moment, and that was also clear at Norwich, where he took his goals well. And when he was taken off by Frank on 2 goals, you'd have thought normally that a striker would be complaining about that because he wants his hat-trick. But Tammy was very, very ready to go because he's quite clearly by that stage he was fatigued. And it will take a while. He's a young man to get used to the pace and the intensity of 90 minutes of Premier League football. We've had plenty of strikers who much older had still not got used to that as a concept. Tammy's got a lot of growing room to go, but he's got plenty of time to do it in. And as I keep on saying, to be scoring goals like this so freely for a player that's this young is just a joy.
Well, he's shown the ability to mentally rise above it, and I think we've seen the number 9 shirt swallow a lot of personal identities and just bring them into a combined element of failure or feeling of frustration. And Tammy has risen to the occasion, has proved Frank Lampard right in trusting him for it, and. We talked about this early in the season before everything kicked off, that like what is the successful or what's the number of goals that make it feel good that Tammy got a chance to start. And I think it was somewhere in like the 15-ish range, Nick, that we kind of landed on. But ultimately, like that puts him with the players of the Pele, the Peles, the Vardys, people who have a double-digit goal contribution up front are people that have an immense value to your side, and I think Tammy is showing us that he is going to be a strong contributor this season. That we might not have to worry about that position as much as we thought for the remainder of the season if this trend continues.
Counterpoint: it's the 5th game of the year, and there's a lot of time to go. I am still very worried about the striker situation. It's not a discredit to Tammy. It's just a kind of a collective goals, offensive movement type of situation. One of the things I noted yesterday, Dan, and I'm not sure if you saw the same thing, was Mason and Tammy had a much harder time linking up and getting kind of that movement in the final third as they did against Norwich. And I think there's probably some lessons to be learned from that. I don't think they're going to have as much time and space on the ball as maybe Norwich allowed for the rest of the year. But, I think there was just a kind of stagnation that happened, even though Tammy did score twice. It was not a brilliant offensive performance.
No, and that is the danger. The weight of expectation now is just piled on too much. Between Tammy and Mason, of course, they've got 5 goals in 2 games, but it is against Norwich and it is against Sheffield United, and are 2 effectively championship sides. There will be much, much harder days. Liverpool is coming up fairly soon, and there's no way that Tammy's going to be given quite much free space. But there have been great signs. There is a clear understanding that's there between Mason and Tammy, and it's been built over many, many years of the pair of them playing together since boys. And we can take advantage of that. This is all new for Chelsea, really. This is something we've not had the opportunity to do before. There are great sides down the years. Everyone knows about the class of '92 at United, and they know about the Liverpool boot room and things like that, where you've had this understanding that's been fostered from boyhood among players. And we've got the opportunity to do that, but just don't expect Tammy and Mason to score 2 goals every game, because I'd like to say now, I think it's fairly unlikely that they're going to manage it against Liverpool. Go ahead, do it, lads. Prove me wrong, and I'll be the first to say, well done. But they're not going to do it every game.
Well, if it is against Liverpool and they decide not to do it against Brighton, I think I would be okay with that one, Dan. I think contextually that would be good. Just a couple of quick stats about Tammy before we transition to talk about another Chelsea youth player who's kind of made it into the first team. Tammy Abraham is the first Englishman to score at least 2 goals in consecutive Premier League appearances for Chelsea since none other than Sir Frank Lampard in January 2010. Impression, and then 5. Each of Chelsea's last 5 Premier League goals have been scored by English players. Abraham 3, Mount 2. For the first time this has happened for the Blues, excluding own goals, since October 2011. 7 from Sturridge, 7 Sturridge 3, Lampard 3, and then Terry Lyons. So some pretty nice stats there, Nick. And again, I think it's the main thing now is just making sure to stay positive, to back these guys, and be excited for what the potential could be if trends continue in a positive direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we've kind of been preaching since preseason. Like, these guys need time. The Premier League doesn't offer a lot of time, though, and that was witnessed yesterday. It's going to be, I think it was witnessed against Leicester, that just because you have young guns and there's a lot of positivity around your club doesn't mean that equals results. Sometimes you have to grind 1-0s or 2-1s out. And, that's it's on Tammy to finish that third goal, certainly, and get his hat trick. It's also on the defense to do their job. And, I think from what I've seen from him, I've been very impressed to this point. Let's just hope he keeps it up and keeps growing.
All right, so transitioning, Tomori was the one who got a bit of a surprise start in this match. Frank did indicate that he'd been training at a really high level and deserved his chance to play today. Probably knew them from playing for Derby last season and getting a chance to play against the newly promoted Sheffield United. I think maybe just quickly, Dan, how did you feel about Tomori's first appearance? I know he had that amazing block near the end of the game, which you thought would be the mental moment that converted the side into a team that could pull it across the line, but at last did not. How did you feel about his performance on the day?
I thought it was generally a good performance. I didn't look at it and think that there were any horrendous moments. There were no real major errors. That block was a really great moment, and I thought it was a good, strong Premier League debut. Looking at defence, certainly, there were individual errors there. We talked about team errors, but there were individual errors, and he wasn't one of the ones I was looking to who was making individual errors.
Nick, was that your assessment as well? Did you see that Tomori was a little bit more composed and a little bit better at being tidy with his play relative to the rest of the defense yesterday?
Yeah, I think the thing that's always stood out to me about his play is just how comfortable he is on the ball, and contrast that with Zuma, who's much more comfortable without the ball, and I mean that in a complimentary way, not a derogatory way. It was interesting to watch those two kind of interact with, kind of passing between them. I would like to see, because I think Tomori has big time ups. He's certainly challenged for a lot of headers and was physical, but his play with the ball is something that I think is going to one day separate him out from the rest. And I'm just hoping he continues to get chances, Dan Levine, until he can really kind of form out who he's supposed to be as a center back.
Definitely, yes, and he is the sort of player that Chelsea are looking for at the back. He can play the ball. He's a good level head. He's very, very comfortable there. Given the number of years under his belt, he looks very, very confident and very, very measured. And Chelsea have been very, very good at turning out players like that. If you look across to someone like Ethan Ampadu, he's a product for a few years' time, maybe. But these guys who just do look so assured on the ball and make everyone around them feel a little bit calmer about doing the job that they have to do. And that is a very strong power he's got there.
I think he definitely looked composed, definitely looked ready to challenge for, or at least give Frank a little bit of a thought from a selection standpoint. And obviously, with Carabao Cup draws having taken place, with our first set of Champions League matches coming up, with, again, the Premier League does not stop for either of those two competitions, that there will be plenty of opportunity for Tomori to earn some selection after putting in a solid performance. One performance that unfortunately got a little shaded in a different light because of the own goal in the dying moments of the game. Zuma did level the scoreline, and it didn't take long for so-called fans to do a quick search for his Twitter and Instagram handles and unfurl their hateful racist assaults in 280 characters or less at him. Nick, I know that Lampard had some comments. I think we want to maybe just share those directly as a first go.
Yeah, he said we have to look at social media and the platforms to give them some accountability, to actually have people register who could be chased down for it. I think it's simple. Unless we get to that, however horrible that conversation is, we're all going to get tired talking about it because there's no culpability. Anybody can say anything to anyone. It could be racism, homophobia, sexism. If we allow it, then unfortunately in modern society, it is out there and it has to be dealt with. Everyone knows from the way I speak and the way the club acts consistently where we want to go with it. And I mean, Dan Levine, that just, it's been a consistent thing, for as long as we've been talking on this podcast, which is over 5 years. I mean, I don't know what, I think Frank's point is like, what else can we possibly say about this?
I mean, some people listening will know this is a subject that's very dear to my heart, and it's something that I've had a lot to say about over recent years. And it's interesting talking to an American audience because, of course, freedom of speech is something that's built into your very being as a country, and that's a great thing. But freedom of speech has to come with accountability. you can't just simply come up with something and have no comeback on it at all. And it is time, I think, for the social media companies to look at the ability of people to say things, whether they say them because they want to, because they've got some sort of ideological disease in their heads, or whether they say it because they just want to cause shock or outrage. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, because the person on the receiving end feels it exactly the same way around. But people can't be continued to allow to say things with no comeback at all. That has to be looked at, and there has to be a different way of doing these things.
And I will say, we did reach out to Dan before this match to chat about Sheffield, and we're not anticipating that this would be the topic we have to discuss, because obviously we have done the 3-part series at the beginning part of last season to talk about Chelsea's history, about combating this unfortunate racial and anti-Semitic issues that have kind of permeated into Chelsea's culture over the years, and how the club has done a really strong job, and supporters have done a strong job to battle back against that. The club's statement in this regard was that the continued racial abuse of players on social media is totally unacceptable, and we condemn it in the strongest terms. The club is disgusted with the posts on social media this evening targeting Kurt Zuma, and join others in the football community in asking social media companies to take action against these individuals. Chelsea FC finds all forms of discriminatory behavior abhorrent. Racism has no place in this club, and where there's clear evidence of Chelsea season ticket holders or members involved with such behavior, we will take the strongest possible action against them. So I think, Dan, the club has, drawn, cemented a line in the ground, not even drawn a line in the sand as where they stand, and has kind of held very good to that over recent seasons to try to help eradicate it. I think it's just, to your point, it's some of it is out of their hands from a standpoint of getting some of the things done, other than just being the biggest advocates they can, being a great ally, and shining a light on what is a major issue.
Yeah, these are, as is frequently said, these are problems of society. They're not problems that are limited to just one sport or just one football club. These do exist in the real world and the outside. But it's very heartening to work with Chelsea, and to support Chelsea, which is a club that's taken such a firm stand on this. You don't see other football clubs doing quite the degree of work that Chelsea are doing around this area. But having said that, these things do require changes to society, and changes by things like social media companies. So one to watch. We're a long, long way from getting this one sorted.
All right, well, we will kind of get ready to wind down this episode on that. One item of note I did put in here, Nick, is that Mateo Kovacic has completed 13 out of 14 attempted take-ons in his Premier League season so far. Only Oliver Norwood has been able to tackle him when doing so. So a little bit of a resurgent player under Frank Lampard, who got a little, even stick from us at the beginning of the season, completing the signing. But he's definitely looking like he's come good.
Indeed. Yeah, he's played very well at the start of the season. I think you point to him, you point to Mason, you point to Tammy, and you point to Emerson as players who have all shown improvement or kind of at least bested expectations at this point. And, now it's kind of up to the rest of the players to kind of match them by doing the same.
All right, and last thing that we probably should talk about here is the league table as it stands. Liverpool, unfortunately, in first place on 12 points. Man City at 10. We have Leicester at 8 points. Palace, Everton, West Ham all at 7 at the moment. Arsenal at 6 with still a game to play against Tottenham at time of recording. United at 5. Sheffield at 5. And us at 5. Spurs at 4. Burnley at 4. Southampton at 4. Newcastle at 4. Bournemouth at 4, Brighton 4, Wolves 3, Aston Villa 3, Norwich 3, and Watford at a whopping 1. So definitely the table as we thought it would stand 4 weeks into the Premier League season, Dan, and pretty much, we're out of the relegation zone, so everything is okay beyond that.
Yeah, just end the season now. 4 games. It's wonderful, isn't it, that people draw league tables after 4 games? But anyway, one thing that's interesting to watch is that last season when we were scrabbling around for a manager, a few people suggested that the Watford manager might be a good shout. Well, maybe not now.
Yeah, Javi may not be the solution here at Chelsea, even if
He'll be available soon. So
That's good news.
I mean, it's
waiting for
possible.
him to not be on a contract so we don't have to pay a fee. That's that would be the real Chelsea model there. All right, well, Dan Levine, anything we should know? I mean, since you've been writing for the Athletic now, anything people should be looking for, should pay attention to between now and the next time we get you on.
I'm just trying to think what I can say. Yeah, I've been doing some stuff for The Athletic, which American listeners will know very well, but is starting to have a real push in the UK, and world dominance appears to be the name of the game. They've got some fantastic coverage, and at the moment I'm writing stuff for them on Chelsea, as is Liam Toomey, and there are a couple of other names that may be about to come in that listeners will know. So it's a space that's well worth watching. And the ambition is to make it the very best place for coverage of the Premier League and of Chelsea.
All right. Well, we will enjoy getting a chance to see you very, very soon in person and celebrate those beers. Apparently, Nick is buying. He texted me that during the conversation we've been having. So just make sure that that's out there and that's cemented in the world.
Pictures where it didn't happen, obviously.
Nick, any final thoughts before we go?
No, I mean, again, not to harp on the racism from quote unquote supporters, but I think the how we can help question is report it on all the social media platforms as quickly as possible. Call it out. If you see it in person, call it out. These people think they have strength behind anonymity, or think they have strength because regular, not racist people won't do anything. Quite the opposite. If you see it, say something, and I think that is the way to beat this thing back into submission.
It's a very fair point. I will end us on the fact that even though the international break is going on, Chelsea Football Club, which comprises many teams, is not done. We do have the Chelsea women who will be taking on Tottenham to kick off their season next Sunday. Dan, will you be there at Stamford Bridge for that?
May well be. I haven't quite decided yet, but it will be bouncing. I think there's 36,000 in for that game, and that'll be a fantastic crowd for a women's game.
Yeah, I think that's going to be wonderful. It's the start of another season under Emma and her squad. And, again, they are one of the Chelsea teams that is always tipped to bring some silverware home. And, again, very, very exciting, especially on the back of the Women's World Cup of this year. So definitely, if you are a Chelsea supporter, Chelsea fan, you are a Chelsea fan of all the teams in this club, there'd be, if you can get the ticket to the match, go see it. If you can't, I'm sure, may like the dev games, that you'll be able to stream it through the Fifth Stand app. So pretty exciting times. But that's it. We're done. We will get you another episode later in the week. But until then, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.